Shri Yechury.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity, sir. I rise to associate myself, as is the norm, as is our constitutional scheme of things, to associate myself with a motion of thanks to the Honorable President's address. But this does not mean, sir, and is never meant, that we agree with the content of that speech, while being deeply grateful, as the motion suggests, to the President of India for delivering this speech. We would like to express our concerns, which I consider are very, very important to understand actually the mandate and what the people of our country are expecting. And therefore, sir, I must confess that I begin with a sense of confusion at the moment. Having heard the Honorable Leader of the House just now, a very dear friend and colleague with whom we have served when he was the Leader of the Opposition, and the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, with whom I worked here when he was an Honorable Minister, and even earlier. Now, when both of them speak about it, I only recollect what Winston Churchill once said after the Second World War, when he lost the elections in England. And it was very surprising that he lost the elections. And he said the only lesson that I learned from this, that you have to be, you have to show magnanimity in victory and humility in defeat. And that, unfortunately, is what is not really, emerged from this, and for which I'm actually pained. It's not that I'm blaming anybody. I'm actually pained for the fact that neither humility nor magnanimity has come. And therefore, it reminds me, if you permit me, with a slight sense of digression, and with, a, with an appeal to the sense of humor, and not to misunderstand me, there's a very popular film that came out, Hollywood film, not a Bollywood film, but a Hollywood film that came out, which is called The Hangover. I didn't understand what was a hangover in politics till now. Now I do understand. The elections are over, sir. We have settled our scores. So the point at issue is what the Honorable President has now outlined as what he thought or what we all consider to be the blueprint for the future. Now, since we are talking of that, I think since the elections are over, the votes have been cast, let us actually begin this exercise of what needs to happen in the future. And a new government that has come and assumed office, we only wish it well. We want it to serve the expectations of the people. We have done so even otherwise outside of the House, and we'll do that in the House as well. But the Honorable President's speech somehow doesn't evoke that sense of confidence that these are matters that are being addressed with the gravity and seriousness that they should be addressed with. Why do I say this? Number one, this speech, sir, is a compilation of all the election slogans that emerged during the campaign. I have no dispute with it. Perfectly easy. It's an easy reckoner, so to speak, like the guidebooks we have in our schools. We can always look back to it and refer to the various slogans that came up during the election campaign. Fine, it can do the job. You can also rehash the election manifesto of the party that won the election. That is also perfectly permissible. But then, how are you going to achieve what has been promised? That is what is expected, and there I think it has been a very, very dismal failure. And that is where I think the blueprint is not there on how do you approach? What is the prioritization? We have all ridiculed the first 100 years, first, not years, and I jocularly, I think the then leader of the opposition pointed out to me from this side that instead of saying the first 100 days, I said 100 years. And that is what was about the then government saying that these priorities are not going to be fulfilled, that didn't happen separately. We have said what we have said in 2009 about the 100 days agenda. But there was a prioritization. They said that we'll do this. They didn't do that. They paid the price. But today, in this speech, sir, there are no prioritizations that have come. It is just only a declaration of intent. However noble the intent may be, however valid the intent may be, the country wants to know how do you proceed in achieving it, what is the roadmap, what is the blueprint. And that is not available here. Because the slogans that are repeated here is one of good governance, one of development. And for the leader of the House and as the leader of the opposition, we were both together in shouting our voice out in denouncing what was called the Ordinance Raj. We both opposed, I mean, on an earlier occasion. Now, the first thing that this government does is to issue ordinances. And when the parliament is meeting a week later, and start governing through ordinances. And for what issue? Okay, when it comes to that, we'll discuss the merit of it. Appointment of officers of the government. Now, so the point is, it sounds very ominous of how this is going to, how the beginning has happened. But the moot point here is the question of development. Now, sir, the point is, why did the people, and the President of India also refers to this, in fact, he says in para 4, this has been an election of hope. Which is true, it's been an election of hope. When I and the Honorable Leader of the House both passed out of our higher secondaries, and when we were looking for a future education, we only had the Delhi University before us. Both of us joined the Delhi University. Different colleges, of course, but we went there. Today, when my youngest son, he passed out of the higher secondary today, he's got 16 institutions in front of him to choose from in the same city. Now, there has been growth, there has been development, there has been an expansion of opportunities, but the hopes that generated amongst the youngsters has not been fulfilled. That is the moot question. How are you going to fulfill that? Ye dil mange more is the slogan that was being used. But how are you going to fulfill that expectation from the people? And for that, I think you have to consider the existing realities, which I'm afraid have not come into consideration. Because if they go by the first section of what the Honorable President has said, from para 1, para 4, para 5, para 7, and then in para 7 he says, and it's actually a little moving. I quote, sir, poverty has no religion, hunger has no creed, despair has no geography. The greatest challenge before us is to end the curse of poverty in India. My government will not be satisfied with mere poverty elevation and commits itself to the goal of poverty elimination. Very poetic and very noble. But then, sir, what is the actual reality in our country today, sir? The actual reality in our country today, according to the Planning Commission's Tendulkar Committee's report, 38% of our population is below the poverty line. It's a very maligned, very debated, highly debated statistics that are involved in it. But on this, there is no doubt that the poverty numbers are huge. Now, mere declaration of intent is not enough. How are you going to alleviate this poverty? What are the specific methods in which you're going to tackle it? How is the beginning going to be made? We are not saying that you can do everything now, but how are you going to make this beginning? And this is something which I can't find, even with a microscope, if you have to look for it in this speech, sir. You talked about inequalities. What is the reality, sir? I remember staying here from the same place, and I can assure both of them. And in the last occasion, on when we were moving a motion for thanks, I said, the two of you may change your places, but I'll remain here, and I'm still here. And I'm still here, and we will continue with our critique, and which I think is in the country's interest, people's interest. And what is that? What is that critique, sir? Why do you say that? The net worth of India's billionaires, sir, in the last 15 years has grown 12-fold. There are 59 billionaires in our country. I have nothing against them. Please, may their tribe increase. Let them grow. But the point is that these 59 individuals have an asset value that is equal to nearly between 1/3 and 1/2 of my country's GDP. And then you have 880 crores, 800 million of our people today who do not survive who cannot survive on more than 20 rupees a day. This is the two Indias that we have been making. If poverty has to be eliminated, this gap of growing inequality has to be bridged. We have one of the highest Gini coefficients in the world today of income inequality. And if this is the case, how are we going to actually address this issue? Yes, that is not possible without a higher growth rate, without a higher growth of employment. Every one of us knows that. But how are we going to achieve that, sir? And in order to achieve that, you have not really substantively spoken of anything in this address. The other concern that has been at the outset referred to is the question of inflation. The Honorable Leader of the House has just now spoken about the rate of inflation being high, the rate of growth being low. Now, how is this inflation going to be tackled? Not a word in this entire address on how this inflation is to be tackled, and we maintain that one of the major causes for this inflation is the permission given for speculative trading in essential commodities, and unless you ban that for some period of time, it is not possible to contain inflation. And secondly, but there's no blueprint, roadmap to suggest that that is even being considered. Secondly, you have this huge stock of food grains with you. Why are you not releasing those food grains to your public distribution system at the BPL rates to the states? Allow that to reach the market, and that will dampen your inflation. No, that is not being done. On the contrary, the first act that happens when this government comes into office is a further hike in the price of diesel, which will increase the transportation costs and therefore trigger off an inflation. So what are the signals that are being sent, sir? And this is where I think there is a lot of concern that how are we going to tackle these problems that the Honorable President of India has actually mentioned. And then he's given this hope, he's added to this hope, saying these elections have been an election of hope. Yes, we all have congratulated our people, we've congratulated our election commission, we've congratulated the youth who have come in, and the President of India actually says that youth is the driving force today in our country, is the largest section of our population. And in fact, he says, my government, I quote, my government will strive to transition from youth development to youth-led development, unquote. Now, how is this youth-led development going to happen, sir? If you provide a youth with health, with education, and with employment, a better India will be built by them. All of us need not debate here about any policies, any further policies. I have that confidence in our youth, and all of us have that confidence in our youth. But then give them that wherewithal. And what is the state of affairs as far as the wherewithal is concerned? I'll just read out one passage from Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. It's written recently in the New York Times. I'll just read out what he said there, a small paragraph. Quote, India has elite schools of varying degrees of excellence for the privileged. But among all Indians, 7 or older, nearly 1 in every 5 males and 1 in every 3 females are illiterate. And most schools are of low quality. Less than half the children cannot divide 20 by 5 even after 4 years of schooling. India may be the world's largest producer of generic medicine, but its healthcare system is an unregulated mess. The poor have to rely on low quality, sometimes exploitative, private medical care because there isn't enough decent public care. Unquote. Now, sir, with this situation, what is that empowering of the youth that we are doing? Education, health. And what is the employment situation, sir? The latest National Sample Survey informs us that the growth rate of employment between 2005 and 2010 is 0.7%. 0.7% is the rate of employment growth. Your youth today is the backbone of our population, of our society, the demographic dividend that we have. This is the state of their education. This is the state of their health. The former Prime Minister had to bemoan, saying that this is a national shame, the children's malnutrition in our country, which continues to remain at a very, very high level. Now, if this situation cannot be changed, what are all these hopes about? And if this situation has to be changed, yes, it's not slogans of high-speed trains or 100 new cities that the country wants. Wonderful, if you can have all of them. But please remember, sir, civilizational advance informs you that cities develop not because you wish them to develop. Cities develop because of economic development. It's not that economic development will happen because you build cities. Unless there's economic development, there are no cities that can be built. We've had a Muhammad bin Tughlaq who talked of dollar. Yeah, all of us know that history. So these 100 cities, I mean, I hope it doesn't end up being that sort of an example. And we know what happened to Badshah Akbar's Fatehpur Sikri. I mean, we are all aware of that. So building cities is not the answer. The answer is economic development that leads to the development of cities. But you put the horse before the, I mean, you put the cart before the horse. Huh? Anyway, so, but anyway, I'm not going into history of it. So the question is that what is the solution? You are now talking of the question of greater investments that will lead to growth. Now, greater investments, you've talked in terms of FDI, and para 40 of the Honorable President's address says here, liberalized FDI in defense production. Now, sir, FDI coming into India, according to us, has always been based on three conditions which are beneficial to my country. A, FDI must expand my productive capacities. B, FDI must increase employment generation. 3, FDI must upgrade India technologically. If these three conditions are not fulfilled, any other type of FDI is not in India's interest, not in the interest of its people. What is FDI in defense production that, in addition, also creates problems for our security concerns? FDI in telecom. I remember those now in the opposition, they used to chide me, saying that you support FDI in telecom 100% in China, but why are you opposing it in India? Where does China allow FDI in telecom 100%, in hardware production? Why is it that every one of us today who has a cell phone here that is made in China? Why are those cell phones not made in India? Now they're slowly coming. But why? Why did we not allow them in hardware production, but why did we do it in services? Not yet. And we allow them in services, which is the profit generating thing. All services provided in China are by the public sector. But here, all services are by the private sector. Hardware production we import. And so what is this FDI policy? Mere appeasement of foreign policy, foreign investors and foreign capital? Or is it going to benefit us? So this main thing that we require, you talk of infrastructural development, you talk of agriculture, for all that requires resources. And these resources, how do you marshal them? Not one word in this entire speech. Where do you marshal these resources from? Last year, the default in direct tax collections, according to the department concerned, was rupees 5.1 lakh crores of rupees. That's straightforward pilferage. I mean, that's what is the official record. This is in addition to the tax foregone, which comes to 5.73 lakh crores. Okay, half of this may be disputed. There may be legal litigation. But even half of that, plus this 5.1, more than 7 lakh crores of rupees of your tax dues, if you collect and use that for public investments, agricultural infrastructure, rural infrastructure, urban infrastructure, all that can be addressed, and you can also provide crores of new jobs for our youth that are today wanting it. And this tax foregone last year, sir, was 53,000 crores more than the entire fiscal deficit. Fiscal deficit of 5.2 lakh crores, tax foregone of 5.73 lakh crores. Now, if these policies are not reversed, and if there is no indication that they are going to be reversed, there is nothing of this hope that will be realized. Then it will be a same story 5 years later when positions may be switched. And then when you say that the people's hopes have been betrayed and you've not lived up to your promises. Now, that is why, unless you seriously address yourself to these issues, forget who will win, who will lose. I'm talking of my own country, our own youth, their own future, and what their own aspirations of converting our demographic dividend as an asset. And that is where, sir, I think there's a very serious drawback in this address, which needs to be addressed by the government now in the future. And I hope this discussion will at least, in the coming days, throw some light. There's no point saying, because of me, so and thing happened, because of you, that so and so has not happened. 10 years ago, when I entered this house, I was 50 years old. Now I'm 60 years old, senior citizen. You can't say that because of the Rajya Sabha, I've become 10 years older. I would have aged anyway, sir. So the country would have progressed in anyway. But you go on saying that, yes, that happened because of me, this didn't happen because of me. The point at issue is, how are you going to address? What is the direction? I'm sorry, I have to say it to the Honorable President, while we associate with the motion of thanks, but that is a very, very serious lacuna and a drawback in this. Coming to the other issues, cooperative federalism, much has been talked about it. Many state governments, I mean, all of us have the experience of being in state governments. We have all talked about it. But, sir, cooperative federalism in our country can never be strengthened unless you have an equitable distribution of finances between the center and the states. You have the Finance Commission that has not once so far till date since independence allocated even 1/3 of the central tax collections to the states. States put together. Today it's about 27, 28%. At the time of independence, we promised 50%. 50% for the states, 50% for the center. But that has never happened. If you're talking of cooperative federalism, are you prepared for a constitutional amendment to come and say that 50% of the central tax revenue will be shared with the states? If that is not, you're not prepared for that, then all this is a hollow slogan. This doesn't mean anything. And elections are over, so sound bites are no longer necessary. So I mean, at least the votes have been cast. Then, sir, come to the issue of terrorism. You talked of zero tolerance to terrorism in para 39. And when you talk of zero tolerance to terrorism, he said everything else is said, all the states will be assisted, modernized, etc., etc. But then what has been happening since the election results have come, sir? Since the election results have come, you have had a spate of growth in communal violence all across the country. You have seen in Karnataka, you have seen in Pune how that youngster, that technician, technical person has been killed. You have seen, and Mr. Sharad Pawar was only telling me a little earlier, that in the state of Maharashtra, 22 communal riots have taken place during the last 3-4 days. Now, all this, just brings to mind the fact that in India, terrorism knows no religion, knows no areas, no bounds, no regions. Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated by a Hindu fanatic. Indira Gandhi was assassinated by a Sikh fanatic. Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated by a Tamil fanatic, or a Sri Lankan, that LTT issue. So who is the culprit is something that goes beyond any one religion. Any assurance in this, sir? The thousands of youth who are illegally detained because of no fault of theirs, because they are routinely picked up because they belong to a particular religion on a terrorist attack? Not one assurance. That wrongly detained Muslim youth will be released who have nothing that can be proved against them, not one assurance. And then you have all such statements that come which give very contrary signals. Madam is coming towards you now, but her statement saying Muslims are not a minority in our country, Minister for Minority Affairs, and saying that reservation for Muslims kills the competitive spirit. The ministers who are making such statements. the question of the question of providing some relief to the Muslim minority came not because of their numbers. It came because of their economic and social status, which was brought out by the Sacha Committee report. That's why the Justice Ranganath Mishra report talked in terms of reservations within the OBCs. But none of those issues are connected here. But what we have is a very passionate reference to Article 370, which comes in para 20. And on that issue, there can be no dispute, sir, that our brothers, Kashmiri Pandits, who have been displaced internally in their own country, should get back a sense of their belonging, should go back to these areas, no dispute. But then what is it sort of talk of, sir? That there will be special efforts will be made to for the return for a settlement in Kashmir. This is very ominous. It just reminds us of the Jewish settlements in the occupied Palestinian territories. What are these settlements that you're talking of? And this is a very ominous trend indicator, if that is the sort of trends that you're talking of. Because in the entire foreign policy issue, the traditional statement saying, expressing solidarity of India with the Palestinians' liberation, that is completely missing. So this Israeli inspiration for how to deal with these problems, that is something that goes completely against the very concept and conception of what India is all about or the idea of India. Sir. So given this, that is why I think, sir, when you come to the final stages of this address, there's a reference to India being a soft power to fully, para 48, I quote, to fully realize our soft power potential, unquote. So far, the criticism that I've heard for the last 10 years in this House when they were in the opposition was that India is a soft state under the former government. That because we were a soft state, we were not able to handle cross-border terrorism that has come in from there. And today you are talking of a soft power potential. What does that mean? What are we talking of this soft power potential? And yes, improving relations with everybody, that is absolutely correct, that we should do in our interest. But remember, the Honorable Chairman of this House, who was here a little while ago before you came onto the chair, as the Honorable Vice President of India, went to attend the swearing in of the President of Maldives on his election. The Honorable Prime Minister then was invited for Nawaz Sharif's swearing in ceremony, and he couldn't go for some other reason, but he deputed a minister of the government of India who attended. These have been happening. It's not as though suddenly it is sprung up only with the election of this government. The SAARC cooperation was on, it was going on. Good, we are continuing it. I'm very happy about it. But then let's not begin with this idea that the world has been created with me. Then we will only end with the idea like Charles XVI, who said, after me the deluge. So if you begin with the idea that the world has been created with me, you will only end with after me the deluge. And that would be disaster for our country. So therefore, please remember when we talk, as the Honorable President talks of our rich spiritual, I quote, our rich spiritual, cultural, philosophical heritage. That is the idea of India. I'll just finish with this point. I know you're all beginning to be impatient, but I'll just finish with this point. The idea of India, the rich cultural, philosophical heritage. And that idea of India is that all-inclusive idea of India. And that inclusive idea of India is both on economic matters and on matters of identity. On economic matters, you cannot solve the problem of unemployment by giving, like what you said in your election manifesto, the right to employers to hire and fire, or like your BJP government in Rajasthan media reports suggest, are doing that they've implemented that in that state. What about the rights of the working people? Where is the working class in this entire speech? Where is the agricultural laborer in this entire speech? Where is the national law for the agricultural laborers in this entire speech? They create our wealth, sir. All of us are here on the basis of the wealth that is created by these working people. Not one mention of them. What is this inclusive India we are talking of? And that is where I think there is something very serious in this entire outlook. And that is where, if you're talking of the rich cultural philosophical heritage, please remember, Dr. Saab is not here, Dr. Karan Singh. He signed the first constitution of Jammu and Kashmir when it acceded into India, which became the law which is still in force in that state as the Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir. But he is a member of our house. But you would say in his Srinagar, there was a small place which has now been restored. All of us have helped in doing that, including my standing committee, which is that famous Pari Mahal, where Dara Shikoh came and authored that famous treatise which was titled as Majma ul Bahrain, the mingling of two oceans. He was talking of Vedanta and Sufism, Islamic Sufism, of how this syncretic culture evolved in our country and how the objectives were same, where we have learned, like Swami Vivekananda said, different rivers flow in different directions but merge finally in the same waters of the ocean. How all of them come and converge into a syncretic civilizational ethos, that is India, sir. Now that cannot be done through any exclusive viewpoint on any aspect at all. When you're talking of a rich diversity, the only thing I remember is, please, I keep recollecting Firaq Gorakhpuri. Firaq Sahib, as all of us know, he was a born Hindu, high caste Hindu. What was Raghupati Sahai? Raghupati Sahai was his name, and he taught English, professor of English in at the Allahabad University. And, and he wrote admirable Urdu poetry. One day, there was a very bad communal atmosphere in our country, but there was a shero shairi that was going on in Allahabad. Permit me to say this, you will also enjoy this. There was a shero shairi that was going on in Ahmedabad, in Allahabad, and he was asked to come, how can it be that we are having a shero shairi in your city and you are not participating? He said, no, the atmosphere in the country is bad. I do not want to say anything today. This is not the time for, your sort of poetry. People insisted, so he said, okay, I'll go there and just recite one share. Just 2 lines he spoke, sir. And that was about Urdu poetry, and that poetry at that point of time, it has a lot to do with enjoyment, with life, etc. So he said in Urdu, Hasil o ishq e husn, bas itni. Hasil o husn e ishq, bas itni. Admi admi ko pehchane. There is no India if we don't recognize the other person, irrespective of religion, caste, creed, whatever it is also as a human being. And if you do not recognize people coming from different religions equally, different castes, laboring class, or the billionaire in our country, if you do not recognize all of them as equals, there is no India that will be left. So when you talk of this cultural, philosophical heritage, etc., yes, Ganga you clean, but also clean Godavari, and on which I was born and brought up. Whose water? Kaveri, Kaveri, Periyar. Please clean all of that. But then Ganga cleaning is a part of the president's speech. Ganga cleaning. But then you had the MP from Varanasi.
Now please conclude.
Yes, sir. The last decade you have, last 2 decades you had the MP from Varanasi, a former president of the BJP. The mayor of the city is from BJP. But only now you suddenly think that cleaning is possible. But anyway, even now if you're going to do it, very good. If you're planning to do it. But then finally, sir, the 3 Ds, the last paragraph when he talks of. With 3 Ds, democracy, demography, and demand on our side. Democracy, sir, unless you think seriously about election reforms. Today, I know, you come from a state where this sort of money is not normally spent, but you've seen what these elections have been reduced to. Parties like ours, it's impossible to function in these elections because you don't allow us to do wall writing, you don't allow us to put up posters, but then there's no restriction on going onto electronic media, spending thousands of crores of rupees on hiring aeroplanes, and then crisscrossing across the country, and then there's a lacuna in the law that political parties' expenditures are not under any ceiling. Candidates are, but not the political parties. I mean, what is this the discrepancy? It's a very incongruous situation. Now, unless you correct these things, it's just money power that will distort your democracy. So electoral reforms, we've been talking about it all these years, but that is required. Honorable President should be reminded when we send back the motion of thanks and we express our gratefulness that you bring in electoral reforms without which, and you bring in proportional representation, 30% of the vote and a majority, 4%, 5% of the vote, and no seat. You know, I mean, this is absolutely incongruous. Are we a democracy? Not once do we have a central government that had more than 50% of the people who voted. Forget 50% of Indians. 50% of the people who voted have not voted for any government in India since independence. There are more people who voted against the government than for the government. Is that democracy? Serious thinking is required. If you want democracy, if you want demography on our side, empower our youth, as I said earlier, give them health, education, and employment. And yes, and if you want demand if you want increasing the purchasing power in the hands of the people. That you can only do if you take care of your working class, your agricultural labor, and the working people. And when the government invests in infrastructure, creates jobs, and gives people money through that job creation. So, sir, unless these are done, these final three Ds cannot serve the country. And therefore, I do hope that this August House, while sending back the motion of thanks, with the thanks to the President, will very humbly remind him of these issues so that his government may be urged that in the coming days to address these issues. I hope we'll do that. And with that hope, I thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sri Yechury ji.